Rick and Morty is a show ripe with unanswered questions. Who is evil Morty? Is our Morty really Rick C-137's original Morty? What's Rick's backstory and why is Jerry such a loser? But of all these nagging questions, there's an old one from season 1 that still has fans scratching their heads. Just who and what is Mr. Poopy Butthole? And with the memorable cameo of Noob Noob in The Vindicators, a new question arose. Is there a whole species of poopy buttholes we should know about? Hey everyone, I'm Justin with Channel Frederator, and today we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite poopy butthole. But let's start at the beginning, and yes, there will be spoilers if you haven't seen the season 2 episode Total Recall, which to be honest is kind of on you because why are you even watching conspiracy videos without seeing one of the finest Rick and Morty episodes of all time? So just pause the video and watch it. I can wait. I'll wait. Just kidding, you know, I'm not waiting at all. Here we go. Total Recall begins with the Smith family eating breakfast with an Uncle Steve we've never really seen before, but they all seem very similar with. Rick shoots Steve in the head and reveals that he's an alien parasite, a creature who inserts itself into your memories. The parasites multiply when anyone flashes back, inserting themselves into a newly fabricated memory that you now think are real. Kinda freaky, huh? Right after Rick's explanation, Mr. Poopy Butthole appears, seemingly out of thin air. All of a sudden, he's in every scene in the opening credits as well. So I know what you're thinking, because I thought it too. Parasite, right? After every other parasite is eradicated at the end of the episode, Beth came to that same conclusion, but when she shoots Mr. Poopy Butthole, no parasite appears. Instead, there's blood. Real blood, and lots of it. What? And with that, you can't write Mr. Poopy Butthole off as a one-episode wonder because he appears at the end of season 2, living in his own apartment with his cat, chugging painkillers for his still-healing gunshot wound, and watching Rick and Morty, hilariously enough, just like us. Of course, this topic has been long beaten to death on the interwebs, but one popular theory was that Total Recall takes place in another dimension with another set of the Smith family. But recently, Justin Roiland pointed out that you can actually see where the alien parasites came from 2 episodes beforehand in Morty Night Run. While Morty leaves to say goodbye to Fart, Rick is loading green rocks into his ship, the same rocks he's throwing away in the beginning of Total Recall. And ta-da! When Rick loads them, you can see they're infested with little pink parasite pods. Roiland specifically put this in as an intrinsic proof that Total Recall does not take place in an alternate universe. Smart guy. But just because the episode itself doesn't take place in an alternate dimension doesn't mean that Mr. Poopy Butthole can't be a multi-dimensional creature. After all, how the bejeebers could he be watching Rick and Morty if he was still inhabiting Rick's C-137 dimension? Weird. I'm assuming Rick and Morty doesn't air in Rick and Morty's actual dimension, but given how excited Rick seems to get when he sees himself on TV, I feel like we would have definitely known that by now. But I'm going to stop pretending like this is an original idea. Dan Harmon himself threw this theory out earlier this year. Quote, how about, wherever these parasites start blooming, Mr. Poopy Butthole is a different species who is more benign or more advanced. Maybe Mr. Poopy Butthole takes advantage of the holes put in your memory and kind of burrows into these pre-existing holes. So he shows up where those parasites are, and he's more of a 4th dimensional phantom species that isn't bound by space and only appears in concentrations of temporal malfunction or misperception and breakdown. Mr. Poopy Butthole is insinuating himself into the universe regardless of the timeline, and the same powers that allow him to do that also allow him to directly talk with the audience. That's us. Okay, so to recap, Mr. Poopy Butthole is an incredibly advanced multi-dimensional parasite who takes advantage of the instability caused by other parasites. But unlike other parasites, Mr. Poopy Butthole doesn't shift form, he cuddles himself into your memories. So conspiracy solved straight from the source, right? Well, not quite, because you know how I know Mr. Poopy Butthole isn't a shapeshifter? Because we've seen other members of his species. Whether you realize it or not, there have been a number of suspiciously poopy-like characters. Benjamin from Ball Fondlers, Steely from Interdimensional Cable 2, and most recently, Dear Noob Noob from Vindicators 3. Other than their appearance, all 4 of these characters have something in common. They're all inherently silly, yet they're all strangely unassuming and unthreatening. I mean, Benjamin is in Ball Fondlers, but he's their driver. You don't even ever see him with a gun, just a derpy smile. He's barely a ball fondler, but he is somehow. Steely, well, steals. He shows up in people's lives and immediately leaves. but he addresses the audience in a manner almost exactly reminiscent of Mr. Poopy Butthole. Sure, maybe he's talking to a camera crew, but honestly, how could he be any good at stealing and sneaking if a team of people were following him? And what camera crew can just go through a wall like that? You can actually see the wall in the cut into the manager's office. Which brings us to Noob Noob. Noob Noob is so disposable as a Vindicator that he's basically their janitor. His guns for his first mission were immediately traded for a mop so he could be left behind to clean up Rick's horrid mess. But it should be carefully noted that Rick takes an immediate shining to Noob Noob. He becomes obsessed with Noob Noob to the point that he builds a disturbed little Disneyland ride just for him. He cries as he tells Noob Noob how much he appreciates him. He even hires Logic to sing behind him at a party. When was the last time Rick said that he actually appreciated someone, wasted or not? And you know who else Rick showed an uncharacteristic and immediate love for? Our boy, Mr. Poopy Butthole. What if this species' efficacy as a parasite is that they present themselves as the silly, lovable, completely ineffectual underdogs? Their hosts want them around, but they're completely inoffensive. They deliberately present themselves as downtrodden enough to avoid any unwanted attention or to come in any actual line of fire. They're not pathetic or seeking any undue sympathy, a la Jerry, but they help out and do what they're told with fun little one-liners or derpy smiles. It's the perfect solution for them to stay with their hosts and do their parasite thing as long as they please. Though the exception here would be Steely. Steely is more brazen than the other three, plus he's a lone wolf criminal. We can't forget he straight up kills a guy. But his line of work is all about laying low and being inconspicuous in plain sight, which seems to be something his species does very well. As far as potential parasiting goes, his whole enterprise seems largely to serve as a way for him to ingratiate himself to us, the audience. Steely might be a rebel for his species, but he still bears a lot of the same tendencies. I'll go one further. The next day, after his intense night of drinking and making death traps, Rick has no idea who Noob Noob is. Sure, Morty knows who he is, but Morty just saw Noob Noob that morning. No parasite can remove a memory that easily. And it's entirely possible that just mentioning Mr. Poopy Butthole is taboo around the Smith household. But what if, instead, the Smiths have forgotten about Poopy because, you know, he decided after being shot that he didn't want to stick around and live in their memories anymore? What if after moving to another dimension, the effect his power had on the family's memories slowly faded away and became obsolete, just like the other parasites? What if getting blackout drunk accelerated this erosion in Rick's memory for Noob Noob? But where's the temporal malfunction or misperception Harmon is talking about? It's interesting to note that both Noob Noob and Benjamin are part of, essentially, superhero teams. Their jobs are guaranteed to put them in situations where there's temporal flux. And Steely, well, he's a rebel. Like I said, he's just going through a self-sufficient phase. Because Steely and Post-Gun Wound Poopy show that the species doesn't need to be parasitic to survive. Nor do I think they're malevolent or dangerous like the other parasites in Total Recall. Seriously, you think Poopy is evil? He, Benjamin, and Noob Noob all seem genuinely social creatures who simply enjoy being around others and just want to hang out. Harmon opened the species subsits on lives like the way that hermit crabs steal other shells. Hermit crabs are vulnerable without their shells, but they make their homes and change them as they see fit. Maybe just like so many other creatures in the Rick and Morty universe, these guys all feel insecure and lonely. They insert themselves into people's memories because they yearn for friendship and camaraderie. Noob Noob, for example, looks incredibly disappointed when he doesn't get to go on the mission. And Poopy looks absolutely miserable living alone, like he got a freaking cat to starve off the loneliness. Instead of going through an excruciatingly slow recovery and needing a cane to get around, if Poopy could return to full health through parasitic means, wouldn't he have returned to the Smiths? Instead of staying with the family he already comfortably asserted himself into as a parasite, he chose to leave their dimension altogether. Why though? If Poopy's intentions were solely parasitic-minded, if other people were purely just sources of substance to him, this decision would make no sense at all. Poopy left because the shooting was emotionally traumatic for him. Parasite or not, someone who he felt close to betrayed him. Maybe for Poopy and his species in general, inserting themselves into others' memories is just them combating loneliness the best way that they can. And those methods can fail like they did for Poopy. He looks now to be in a depressive rut. So what if we concluded. First, that Mr. Poopy Butthole's species are advanced, multidimensional parasites who insert themselves into host memories, but whose effects on hosts do actually fade over time. Second, they use their parasitic abilities not for evil means or for sustenance in a conventional way, but because they crave companionship. And lastly, their success as a parasitic species comes from the fact that they are silly enough to want to have around and inconspicuous enough to be allowed to stay. All in all, I'd say this theory holds up pretty well, and not just because the creators helped it along. I'd have to give this theory 4 grapples out of 5. So what do you think about our Poopy Butthole theory? Can you find any holes? Let us know in the comment section down below, and subscribe to channel Frederator so you don't miss any videos on Rick and Morty or any of your other favorite cartoons, as well as the new episodes of Cartoon Conspiracy that drop every Thursday. My name's Justin aka Scoutfly, and never forget, Frederator loves you.